73 in the Church Bibles. When Jesus spoke again to the people, he said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." The Pharisees challenged him. "Here you are, appearing as your own witness. Your testimony is not valid." Jesus answered, "Even if I testify on my own behalf, my testimony is valid, for I know where I came from and where I am going. But you have no idea where I come from or where I'm going. You judge by human standards. I pass judgment on no one. But if I do judge, my decisions are right because I am not alone. I stand with the Father who sent me. In your own law it is written that the testimony of two men is valid. I am one who testifies for myself. My other witness is the Father who sent me." Then they asked him, "Where is your Father?" "You do not know me or my Father," Jesus replied. "If you knew me, you would know my Father also." He spoke these words while teaching in the temple area, near the place where the offerings were put. Yet no one seized him, because his time had not yet come. This is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Thank you very much. Good morning. Now, just before I start, I've got to inform you that I've got some bad news and a lot of good news for you this morning. A little giggle. The bad news is that we're dealing with some really deeply complex theological and scientific issues this morning. That's the bad news. The good news is that I am the filter for those concepts. So it'll be broken down into simple and accessible concepts for all of you. For the theologians that are out there that may want to dispute what I say, come and see me afterwards and we can discuss it. For the scientists, come and see me afterwards and tell me what I really meant. Okay, so to read the text this morning, it's a bit like seeing a poster for a concert or for a music festival, where there is a headline act and then there's loads of other acts. Now, the other acts are all good and they're all important, but the headline act is the one that jumps out. It's the one why you're buying the ticket. And it's the same in this for me. It's all good stuff. There is loads of stuff in it that we can take out of it and apply to our lives. But I want to focus on the one sentence from Jesus. When Jesus said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness, but have the light of life." There are so many layers to the statement that Jesus made there, and it is huge. And there's a lot of reasons why I think he used the language he did, and he said it in the way that he did. The same as the word Eucharist is derived from the word Eucharistia in the Greek and means literally thanksgiving. The word Torah in Hebrew literally means teaching. Now that I've justified my 2 years at theological college, Mark. The word Torah means teaching, but it was also used to refer to the law and to the things that the Jews would use to apply to their lives in terms of how to live. It also refers to the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible. And all of the teaching and laws were connected to that, to the Torah. And Jesus here is basically speaking from the Torah. He is intentionally using language that they can relate to, and that more than that is important to them. Jesus said, "I am the light of the world." That is a significant statement. He uses the phrase, "I am." And he uses it a lot of times in this gospel, the I am statements. But God also introduced himself to Moses, and when Moses said, "Who should I tell them sent me?" God said, "Tell them I am sent you." Jesus uses "I am" here and in other examples throughout the Gospel to reveal the character and nature of God. So it's significant that he shows that. Also that he said, "light of the world." Because in Exodus we see the pillar of fire being used to light the way. So he's speaking into that also. And this is following on from the declaration as living water, which we also know that water came from the rock. So Jesus is preaching in language that they understand and relate to as important to them from Exodus. And it was at a time when they were celebrating the Feast of the Tabernacles, which was celebrating God's provision. Jesus was intentional about what he said and where he said it. But what did he mean? Well, he says, "I am the light of the world." What does light do? Whoever follows me will not walk in darkness. We all know what it's like walking through a dark room. Sometimes at night, and you may be able to relate to this, I need to get up and go to the bathroom, or I don't know, have a snack or whatever else it is. And I need to do that. And there's that moment of tension within me, there's that moment of decision where I'm going, right, do I turn on the light, or do I go through the dark? And both have issues. It's not helping my illustration, but they do. If I turn on the light, I face the wrath. There's a risk I will disturb other people. But then there's that thing, can I remember where I left everything in this room to get to where I need to be? And I usually go, right, I don't want to disturb Kate. It's not fair. And then I go, right, I'm going to go for it. But I'm trying to be quiet and trying not to disturb her. And inevitably, through that, I bump into everything that was there and everything that wasn't there, I swear, when I turned the light off, but is there now. But I bump into everything, and ultimately I end up making more noise. Because I'm not confident, I can't see the dangers, or the shoes, or socks, or whatever it is it's like. I can't see them. So I make more noise. But Kate never mentions it. But light illuminates the way. It helps us see where to go. It gives us confidence and assured footing in that. I'm going to get a bit scientific with you here. We need light to see. That's as deep as I'm going with my science in that. Light goes into the eye does something cool we can see. I didn't want to go too much deep because there's people here doing GCSE science and I'm not going to do it for you. I don't have time to fully go into it. Basically, without light, we wouldn't be able to see. Without Jesus, we can't spiritually see. Light is such an interesting concept because it means so many things. In science, it can't fully be classified because it's a wave and a particle. In our language, it's much more than that, and much more than the simple definitions that I think that it's given by dictionaries. One such definition is, light is something that makes vision possible. I've already covered that. Another one says, electromagnetic radiation of any wavelength that travels in a vacuum with a speed of approximately 186,281 miles per second. Specifically, such radiation is visible to the human eye. And those are technical definitions of light, but the concept seems much more than that. More about that later. But first, let's skip back to the beginning of John's Gospel, where it says, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and life was the light of men. The light that shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it." Jesus is the light, and the light is life. But when we look at that final verse, it really stands out to me. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it. And some Bibles will say that darkness has not comprehended it, which I think is better. Because what we're really talking about here is a conflict of ideas, light versus darkness. And the darkness wants to drown out the light, but no matter how hard it tries, darkness cannot overcome light. Darkness can also represent evil. Ephesians 6 says, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms." Sometimes in this world we feel that evil has a face. And sometimes it does. We can watch the news and see people that commit horrific acts. There is a darkness in the world. But the good news is that darkness cannot overcome the light. And I think at this point it's important to identify that not all those that are in darkness, who Jesus is referring to, are people that are committing evil acts. They're just not walking in the light. The good news is that Jesus is the light of our world. If we come back to John 1, verse 5, the light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it. Jesus is the light of our world, not because we chose him, but because he chose us. And I think that's what so many people don't understand. God gives us the choice to follow him, but that doesn't affect the fact of whether he is God or not. He is God no matter what. Just because you don't believe something doesn't mean it's not true. And as we look at the world, we can see darkness. There is darkness in the world. But ultimately, darkness is an illusion. We can feel it, we can see the effects, we can be consumed by it. But the definition of darkness is simply the absence of light. It may feel real, and to our perception it may be real, but it's just an illusion. The minute light is introduced into a darkened room, darkness is instantly banished. And we're often in dark situations, but when we introduce Jesus into those dark situations, it should change the darkness of that situation. The situation may not be fully resolved, it may not be instantly gone, but it should change the way that we can see through that situation, that we can see into that situation, and the hope that we have whilst we're in that situation. Because where there is light, darkness moves. In the end, darkness cannot overcome the light because light is real and darkness is not. Darkness is just being away from the light. One day in the future, when Jesus returns, all darkness will be eradicated. So the more of the light that we shine into the darkness, the less darkness there is. Jesus said, "I am the light of the world." So we can see that light illuminates and shows the way. Light drives out darkness, because ultimately darkness is simply the absence of light. The people walking in darkness are doing so because they haven't been introduced to the light. Light is so much more. And this is where we get a bit sciencey. Without light, there would be no food to eat and there'd be no air to breathe. In other words, without light, there would be no life. In a very broad sense, life could not exist on Earth without the readily available presence of light. I imagine that at least some of you are familiar, probably more so than I, with the process of photosynthesis. GCSE science. Where a plant uses chlorophyll to absorb light from the sun and in turn creates sugars which are broken down into glucose, which provide nutrients or energy for the plant. What you may not know is what goes into this process. Plants contain a compound called, let's say, ADP. ADP is essentially useless. It does nothing. When light is absorbed, it initiates a series of chemical reactions that change ADP into ATP, which is amazing. The plant is basically dead. It has no life. It can do nothing. But when light is absorbed by the plant comes to life. What is produced, the ATP, is food for the plant. We would call it a nutrient. But the nutrient feeds not just the plant, but any animal that eats the plant. So we see the effect of light. Light brings that which was dead to life. And then when the light is absorbed, the organism that absorbed it has life. You see, it's not food that enables your body to function and have life. It's the nutrients that are found in the food. All of those nutrients work their way back to the plants as a result of their absorption of light. Life can be broken down in what are called trophic levels. Look, this every day is a school day. You might think of this as the circle of life. So, for instance, basically, the plant absorbs the light, grows, lives. An animal eats the plant, absorbs the nutrients in that. An animal eats the animal, an animal eats the animal, and so on and so forth. So they all benefit because of what the plant absorbed. So they all benefit along that process. Without the plant's production of nutrients, the plant would die. Without being able to eat the plant that produced the nutrients, the animal would die. Essentially, without light being absorbed by a plant, there would be no life. So light is necessary for life. And there's another important aspect to this process: the air that we breathe. During the process of photosynthesis, plants emit oxygen, which we need to breathe. They only emit this oxygen when they are absorbing energy from the light. No light, no oxygen, no oxygen, no life. Light is the source of all life. It's far more complicated than you might think and that I can possibly understand. And in addition to affecting the biological world, light also affects our own physiological existence, which is just a clever way of saying it affects us. UV, radiation, light from the sun, produces or changes a compound in our blood into vitamin D. Vitamin D promotes bone formation and allows the body to absorb calcium, which gives strength and density to your bones. Without vitamin D, your bones would be more frail and more easily broken. And the only natural way in which vitamin D is produced is through light. Secondly, there's something about melatonin, but when I was looking at it, it was just far too complicated for me. So Google it yourself. Basically, it helps regulate your sleep pattern so that your body knows when to sleep and when not to. But when Jesus spoke again to the people and he said, "I am the light of the world. Whoever follows me will never walk in darkness, but will have the light of life." The image of light is a powerful one. Light is a source of all life. Do you think it's any coincidence that Jesus is called the light? Jesus brings life to that which was dead. He takes an organism that is dead and brings it to life. Physically, as humanity, we were brought to life through Jesus. That's what the opening of John tells us. Spiritually, we're brought to life through Jesus. Jesus enables us to see the truth. He gives us sight. All that we have is because of Jesus. Full life as it was intended without him is impossible, for he is the source of life and all existence. Light is everything. Without light, there is nothing. What better way is there to describe Jesus Christ other than he is everything? He is the creator and sustainer of life. He is the light of the world, and that light is the life of men, or mankind, or people. The parallels are there with how light works. John was right when he called Jesus the light. Through him all things were made. Without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of men. The light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not understood it. Light is not just an important scientific concept, it's a vital part of Scripture in its association with both God and Jesus. God's first creative act was to make light. The earth was formless and empty. It was in this formlessness and emptiness that God created light from nothing. The disorder or chaos of the universe was overcome with the light that God created. Light was the order of God. And when he returns, there will be no darkness. Light reveals that which is hidden, which cannot be seen. And as we've already said, if you turn on the light in the room, you see all things that you might trip over or hurt yourself. Light reveals what is hidden. God was hidden. He's great and he's mysterious and we cannot understand him. But Jesus is the light to understanding God, the nature and character of God. Jesus is the light of the world and he reveals God to us. If it were not for Jesus, there wouldn't be a lot of scripture showing us the nature of God. If it was not for Jesus, there would be no ultimate example of how to live. If it were not for Jesus, there would be no sacrifice showing us that God loved us. We know what we know about God largely because Jesus revealed it to us. He is the light of the world. He gives us light. He reveals to us what is in the darkness. He is good. Jesus is the light of life. Without him, there is no life. So in that one statement, Jesus said a lot. But what does that mean for us? There is darkness in our world, whether it's through conflict that we read about in the news, illness, despair, grief, addiction, poverty. There is darkness. And we are called to be reflectors of Jesus' light into that darkness. Like the reflectors that I used to put on the spokes of my bike as a child, or the reflectors that were used in lighthouses to reflect the light so that people knew there was danger. We are called to reflect the light of Jesus into the world. And the closer that the reflector is to the light, the more light that is reflected. So the closer we get to Jesus, the more light we can reflect into the lives of those that are living in darkness. We are called to be salt and light. So we need to illuminate into the darkness in our society and our world. We need to reflect the light of Jesus. Amen.